What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today it is Friday, and on every Friday I'm going to go ahead and bring you guys a budget deck list from now on. I've been promising some budget deck lists, and now it's time I have to start delivering on that. I'm going to go over the deck list a little bit different than my normal deck list video. I'm going to go over obviously the leader and the deck list for the budget deck list, and then also go over the price of the budget deck list. Then I'm going to go ahead and hop into a deck list that you can go ahead and make some swaps to improve it when you want to go ahead and spend a little bit extra money to improve the deck, and then go over the cost of that deck. We're going to compare the prices, and I'm also going to go over like why each deck list that's on the budget can still compete and what makes it pretty effective even on a budget. So with that being said, the first deck list we're going to be going over is the Leia deck list. I love Leia. I think that she's one of the deck lists, especially on a budget, that can still compete pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and go over the deck list. We're not going to go over every single card. We're just going to kind of go over, you know, the main pieces of the budget aspect of it. And then again, we're going to hop into a normal deck, compare what I swapped in and out, and go over the prices. So starting off with Leia, obviously, as we know, for an action, you can attack with a rebel, then you may attack with another rebel. It allows you to go super fast. It allows you to keep up the pace. Usually you're going to be gaining the initiative with Leia, which is what makes her so good. And the fact that she only requires you to have 5 resources for her epic action, she'll end up coming out. She has raid 1, which makes her stronger. So she's a 3/6, but she hits for 4. And then on attack, you may attack with another rebel unit. So obviously this deck list is going to be both on the budget and the non-budget side, focused around rebel units and trying to attack fast into your opponent's base. We have on the budget side of things, we're running the Catacombs here. It is a 30 HP base. It's not the rare base. Again, we're on a budget, so we're going to try to keep it that way. This also isn't a bad thing. Tarkentown is pretty good, obviously, but the 30 HP base with Leia is still very viable. You're not going to be able to deal damage to a damaged unit, but still, this can work. You having that extra HP could come in handy in certain matchups. So as you see here, we're going to show the low costing ground units first, right? We have Benthic 2 Tubes. You know, he's really good here. He allows you to, when he attacks, to give another red unit raid 2. That's going to come in handy when you are using your red rebels to swing. You can go ahead and use Leia's ability to swing with him, and then go ahead and swing with one of your red rebels and get the raid 2 on that turn, so you don't have to worry about the fact that you might have your opponent destroy that rebel unit that gets raid 2. With Leia's ability, you can go ahead and get it done in one turn. It's just really, really good there. Obviously, you have things like Battlefield Marine and, you know, Sabine. One of the cards in this deck that I think works really good with Leia over any other aggression deck is the Sympathizer, the Ardent Sympathizer, is because while you have the initiative, this unit gets +2/+0, and with Leia, you are gaining the initiative more often than not. So more often, you're going to be a 5/3 for the cost of 3. It makes it so your opponent has to really kind of deal with it. And if you do have the initiative, they're swinging something in and they're going to be taking 5 damage back. So they have to be kind of cautious on what they do sacrifice into it, or they're going to have to use their events. So it requires your opponent to kind of use their resources to deal with this, because again, you're going to be gaining the initiative more often than them. And using this tied in with some other cards could be really devastating for them. Then you have obviously the Echo Base Defender. It's a Sentinel. It's actually pretty strong because it does swing for 4. So again, your opponent has to kind of deal with it. Taking 4 into their base each turn is pretty bad, and having Sentinel to protect your base is pretty good. Now we have one of the most important cards of the deck is probably the Fleet Lieutenant. Being able to, when played, you can go ahead and swing with a rebel unit. Well, you can swing with anything, but with a rebel unit, it deals 2 extra damage, right? So this plus Ardent Sympathizer is really, really strong. You can go ahead and start swinging in for 7 when you have the initiative, and that's a big chunk of your opponent's base. So those are the combos you kind of want to see. And again, with Leia, you are, you know, rocking a ton of rebels and stuff like that. We have other things. Rebel Pathfinder being a Saboteur is kind of important with this deck, because when you're playing against an opponent that plays a ton of Sentinels, this deck can be kind of slowed down. So getting in those Saboteurs, and you can go ahead and throw in other things that have Saboteur. This is just kind of, I put in Rebel Pathfinder because I have other things in the deck that can go ahead and swing into base. And having 3 HP while also having Saboteur gives him some longevity, not being able to be taken out with like an ability or just being swung in by a 2 attacking unit with a 2 power, right? So You know, obviously we have other things in here, Fighters for Freedom and Sabine, right? Sabine being able to clear out maybe a Sentinel on your opponent's side while also dealing 1 damage to the opponent's base could be pretty good while still getting damage into that base on attack. And then Fighters for Freedom allowing you to just deal damage whenever you play a red card is just really strong. And you can get a couple of these onto the board. You can start doing 2 damage per red card you play. It can really start racking up that damage. The highest the highest costing ground unit we play is Gorilla Attack Pod. I played as a 2 of. It's just going to be there to drop late game to maybe get that final swing on your opponent without them knowing it's coming. To maybe just get it kind of, you know, if they clear out the board and they have like 3 HP left and you have 6 resources, drop this down. It comes in ready as long as they, you know, have 15 damage on board, or, you know, if any base does. So it just comes in ready if there's 15 damage on a board, and then bam, you can go ahead and swing in for game with this thing. So it's just kind of that, like, that security blanket in this deck for sure. Now getting into our space units, we play 11 space units. Again, this is on the budget side of things, so this might not be optimal, but we're playing Alliance X-Wing. It's just a 2-drop Rebel space unit. This just continues with the Rebel theme we got going on. Green Squadron A-Wing, it's still one of the best space units to drop on turn 1 because it does have raid 2. It's just really strong, though it is a target to be swung into. If you can get the initiative, which you do at Leia, you can really get some damage in quickly with this unit. Wing Leader is just to give that extra punch, you know, give out 2 experience tokens if you need to go ahead and do that to get a little bit of extra damage in a turn. And then we play Bright Hope. Bright Hope is great. You can go ahead and play, you can return a friendly ground unit to your hand, and then you can go ahead and draw a card. So it gives you that draw power, because sometimes with aggro decks, you kind of fizzle out if you get to like the mid to late game because you're out of cards in hand because you played them all to deal as much damage as possible. So this allowing you to pop a card back to your hand and then go ahead and draw a card is really good. This works very, very well with Fleet Lieutenant because you can go ahead and use Fleet Lieutenant's ability again after using it for the first time. So it just allows you to use other abilities multiple times. So that's going to do it for all the units. As you see, they're all Rebels. They all work really well with Leia. You're trying to keep up that speed. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the events, and the events are other things that can kind of try to keep up that speed and momentum. One of my favorite red cards and event cards to run in aggro decks when you're running red is Precision Fire. It gives a unit Saboteur, and if it is a trooper, it gets +2/+0, so you can really finish off something. Your opponent might think they're safe while having Sentinels in either area, and then you can go ahead and drop this down, get Saboteur, swing into their base anyway, and you can keep up that pressure. I always have this as a 3 of in any aggro red deck that I have because it is just really good to get around those Sentinels. I have Rebel Assault at a 3 of in this deck. It works really well with Leia. I think the combination of having Leia on the field and 2 other Rebel units plus this card is absurd. You can go ahead, use this, you attack with Leia, she gets +1 to her attack. On the attack, then you proc her ability. Then you get to attack with another Rebel unit. Let's just say we attack with Benthic 2-Tube, right? And so we go ahead, we swing with Benthic 2-Tube. You get raid 2 on that red unit with Leia's Fighters for Freedom, and it goes ahead and attacks with the other part of Rebel Assault. So then you're getting +3 on Fighters for Freedom, so you're attacking for a total of 6 damage, and that combination just gets kind of crazy, and you can do a ton of different ones as long as they're all Rebels. So I just really like this card in Leia specifically, because you get to use it with her ability and really get to pop off for some damage. Then I have 3 of Keep Fighting. Again, it's a cheap card. You get to re-ready up a unit with 3 or less power, which is a ton of units on the board. And if you use things like Wing Leader on Green Squadron A-Wing, you can still ready it up. It only has 3 power, but it is going to be attacking for 5 damage, which is just really strong. Keep Fighting is a good way to keep up the pressure and then attacking your opponent's base. And then I have 2 Infiltrator skills. The reason I have this is so I can go ahead and give something Saboteur if I need to get around Sentinel. It's just a really good card in just trying to, again, keep up that pressure with this deck. You can go ahead and give it to Leia or anything in general. They get +1/+1, and again, Saboteur being the main key thing that this thing adds to a unit. So with that being said, obviously you're seeing here, you want to keep up the speed and the tempo with this deck using Leia's ability, gaining the initiative. Ardent Sympathizer works really well with gaining the initiative and stuff like that. You're just dealing a ton of damage as fast as possible to your opponent's base. Again, the things that this deck might struggle with are control decks that kind of use Sentinels and stuff like that. Also Boba Fett when they're going ahead and clearing out your units and going that route. But again, you're going to be gaining the initiative more often than not. So your priority is to deal damage as quickly as possible. And sometimes, listen, you're going to have to swing into your opponent's units. You do that when you see fit, but still the focus is on your opponent's base. All of that being said, This deck is a whopping $9.27. The link to it will be down in the description. It'll go over everything and then also have the price. $9.27 for a deck that, in my opinion, can kind of compete in, really good matchups. Leia is really strong, a really strong leader, and all these units do actually end up going into a normal Leia or green-red aggression deck anyway. So it just, you can, again, get a ton of value out of this. It's less than $10. Play this deck, try it out, and then obviously we're going to be going into some upgrades that you can go ahead and do. So let's go ahead and talk about the upgrades and what you can go ahead and add into Leia after you get the practice with your budget deck, right? So when we go into the more expensive deck, you're going to be adding in rares. I'm not adding in any legendaries into the deck because I don't think they're necessarily needed in the main board. I have legendaries in my sideboard, and I have other rares in my sideboard, right? I have things kind of like Mace Windu potentially in the sideboard, Home 1 if you're getting into those longer matchups. Ewing Reinforcements as a sideboard card for me with Leia. It can help, especially when you add in the bigger units. But again, I'm still kind of keeping the same idea for the deck, trying to keep those low-costing units swinging in with a bunch of rebels and trying to get damage as quickly as possible. So there's going to be no legendaries on this list, which is kind of good news. That being said, it's still a pretty expensive deck because of the rares that I will be adding. So we obviously are keeping in the Battlefield Marine, the 2 tubes, the Sabines, right? All those things. Ardent Sympathizer is just really good in Leia. I'm keeping all that. Echo Base Defender. When you get into the upgrade as far as the ground units go, I'm adding in 3 K2SO. K2SO is really good. You can go ahead and use it with Overwhelm to swing into the Sentinels, take out Sentinels potentially, and deal damage to the base anyway. And then also, when it's defeated, for each opponent, choose one, either deal 3 damage, or you can go ahead and make them discard a card from hand. It's extremely, extremely powerful because you can go ahead and take out, again, a Sentinel. Maybe if you don't even get the overwhelm damage, it's still okay because you're going to be able to deal 3 damage to your opponent. Or if they only have 1 or 2 cards in hand, make them make that choice and make them discard a card. So K2SO is really strong. It is a rebel, so it works with Fleet Lieutenant and other things like that. So you can go ahead and use Fleet Lieutenant to give it that power to swing over heftier Sentinels, which is just really good. So having that rebel tag makes it very, very good in this deck. Another card that we go ahead and add, and we're taking out the X-Wings, right? The Alliance X-Wings, and we're throwing in these red 3s. The red 3s make the heroic units in the deck just stronger because they go ahead and get raid 1. It is a little bit expensive. It is a rare card. It's just a good way to go ahead and make your units stronger when they attack to keep up that pressure. And obviously we're going to replace the X-Wing, the Alliance X-Wing, with this card, right? So a few other cards, we're going to be getting rid of our upgrade, right? We have no more Infiltrator skill, though it could still be viable and if you want to run it, because getting Saboteur in this deck is just really good. But we go ahead and we add in the Heroic Sacrifice. So instead of the 2 Infiltrator skill, I add in the 2 Heroic Sacrifice. You get to draw a card. Again, gaining that draw power in a deck like this is kind of key. And then you get to deal 2 damage extra on your attack, and the ability that it gains is when this unit deals combat damage, defeat it. So you can use this with K2SO or other units to swing in, maybe potentially for game and stuff like that. But still, getting that draw power and to get that extra damage is just really good. And if you use it with K2SO, you can deal the extra damage, deal the overwhelm damage if you need to do so, or just deal damage to the base, which will get you 6 damage on the base, and then he blows up, and then he deals 9 total for the turn. So that's really, really good damage. And it's only the cost of 1. So keeping that low cost to keep up the pressure to be able to do other things in a turn is also really key with this. And then I go ahead and I add in the For a Cause I Believe In. Now, the reason why I add the For a Cause I Believe In, to be able to set up future plays, to maybe get the Fleet Lieutenants on top of the deck, the Precision Fires, the Assault, a Rebel Assault, stuff like that, to kind of make sure that you can keep up the pressure is really good. Also, the ability that when you reveal the 4 cards on top of your deck, any of them being heroic, they add 1 damage to your opponent's base. So let's just say you go ahead and you draw 3 cards. Boom, you get to go 3 heroic cards out of the 4. 3 damage to your opponent's base, and you get to set up your future play. So it's just really good in this deck. And as you see, we're just going to be getting rid of a few things now. One of the things the Rebel Pathfinder getting rid of is kind of iffy for me. Maybe keeping that Saboteur might be okay. But for right now, again, We get rid of the Alliance X-Wings for the Red 3s. We get rid of the Rebel Pathfinders for the K2SOs. We get rid of the Infiltrator skill for the Heroic Sacrifices. And then finally, we go ahead and we get rid of the Partisan Insurgent for the Four Claws, I believe. And now the Partisan Insurgent, the reason behind that is, yes, it does get stronger with the red cards on base. But I do think that we're prioritizing other units more than the Partisan Insurgent. So I go ahead and I scrap that for the Four Claws, I believe. And so those are the swaps that you make. And then you're going to see the jump, though, right? You're going to see the budget list goes from a $9.27 deck, very affordable, still really good, and then it jumps up to a whopping $118.08 from these changes. Now, obviously, with these changes, the deck does get a little bit stronger. I also didn't go over the base. We added Tarkin Town because being able to deal 3 damage to a non-leader unit could come in handy, especially if a deck is using a bunch of Sentinels to slow you down. You deal damage to it and probably take it out with this Tarkin Town. It's just pretty good. That being said, the price difference is crazy. I still like playing Leia. I play Leia on the lesser budget side just because I have the cards, and I do think that it is a really fun, strong deck. But that being said, it doesn't take away from the fact that the budget version of this deck is very viable, very fast, and can keep up with a lot of decks and outpace a lot of decks. It's just, can you get the final hit before your opponent starts to stabilize? That's the main thing you're kind of looking for when it comes to this deck. And I do think that the budget side of things does have more answers for that Sentinel problem, like the Infiltrator skill and the Rebel Pathfinder. But what the upgraded version of the deck does end up doing is it adds in K2SO, which gives the overwhelming. It also gives you a unit that you're not afraid to swing into other units with, and it makes it so your opponent has to kind of deal with it because they know that if they leave small units on the board, I'm just going to swing into it with this and get overwhelming damage. So you're getting multiple forms of damage with K2SO. The Red 3, again, being able to pump up your units to get more damage is also really viable. And then the Heroic Sacrifice, getting that tempo with being able to play a card and being able to attack in a single action is strong. And then the For a Cause, cycling your deck, setting yourself up for future plays. It's just, again, these 4 cards are why Red Heroic is really a good color and a really good thing to play. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this style of budget video. If you guys want to see more of these types of videos, let me know. I'll go ahead, recommend a budget list down below, what you want me to go over. With that being said, we're going to go on and get out of here. If you guys are new here and you're enjoying the content, make sure you hit that sub button. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.